I was on my break here at work, and I was about to begin practicing. My only regret was that I only had about half an hour, and I'd really love to practice for 40 hours. Unfortunately, there's not a way to do that. But what if there was? I got to thinking, what if I really did want to practice 40 hours in a day? What would it take to accomplish? First, of course, we would need to define what a day even is. Technically speaking, a day is defined as the rotational period of the Earth as relative to the Sun. This means that a day is 24 hours, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. And that's a problem, because it means that practicing 40 hours in a day just straight up isn't possible. That's not going to stop us, though. See, we're humans, and we like making things up. And we made up a thing called the Gregorian calendar in 1582. This calendar establishes that there are 24 hours in a single calendar day, but that day is not 100% accurately tied to the rotational period of the planet. Hence, we have leap years and whatnot. We could define day as daylight hours, as in when the sun is up. But this just doesn't make sense with how we use the word day. We tend to use day much more semantically. We could define a day as the day we refer to when we say something like today or work day. If you get up at 5 a.m. and then stay up till 9 p.m., you spend a significant amount of your day awake at night. And indeed, if you have a night shift, your day could actually cross 2 calendar days, going from 10 p.m. on one day to 7 a.m. the next day. Your work day was only 8 hours long, but it crossed over 2 days, and all of that time was at night. This means that a day is really just the time that you're awake. So someone could get up at any time, stay awake, and practice for 40 hours straight, and then go to sleep, and that would be practicing 40 hours in a day, right? I don't think so. Not only does it not fit within any reasonable perception of the word day, since people take naps during the day, and that doesn't mean that their day stopped, but it also wastes time overall. A person can't reasonably practice for 40 hours without breaks and still make that practice efficacious. You're just going to wear yourself out. We're approaching the limits of what's humanly possible. You'd just be wasting practice time. And in the end, I don't think TwoSet would want you sacrificing practice time for the sake of a meme. So instead, we need to practice 40 hours in just one calendar day. And I've come up with 3 ways to do just that. The first and least achievable involves breaking every law of physics. You need to board a spaceship that can fly at any velocity c relative to Earth. This means that you'd be traveling some percentage the speed of light, which would cause you to experience time differently relative to the rest of the universe due to time dilation. At 0.8c, you could practice for 24 hours and 40 hours would have passed on Earth. At 0.9c, you'd only have to practice for 17.5 hours to practice for 40 hours relative to Earth. And at 0.99c, you'd only have to practice for less than 6 hours. But wait, sure, you're practicing for the full duration of a 40-hour day on Earth, but you're actually losing time practicing, since for all that time, you had to practice a shorter amount of time. That's the opposite of what we want. Oh, I know. We could put the Earth in a giant spaceship and make it travel at 0.99c, which means that we could practice on the moon for 40 hours and it would only take 6 hours on Earth. Okay, so clearly this is problematic. Let's move on to number 2. The second way we could practice 40 hours involves manipulating the calendar a little bit. See, as the Earth rotates, the day moves at about 1,000 miles per hour across its surface. If one were to board a plane early in the day and then fly at 1,000 miles per hour, they could stay in the same patch of sunlight indefinitely, meaning you'd practice 40 hours in a day, right? Well, not quite, because at some point you would cross the international date line and change calendar dates. So you'd have to fly slower than 1,000 miles per hour, at about 500 miles per hour. You could extend your day by half, turning a 24-hour day into 36 hours. This actually happened to me as I took off from Beijing at around midnight on May 31st, boarded a second plane in Switzerland, and then flew to New York. Because I was flying that whole time with the sun, my day lasted over 30 hours. Unfortunately, even if you were to somehow perfectly time your flight with the rising and setting of the sun and stay awake for 40 hours straight, There's no way you'd be able to maintain the speeds necessary to experience 40 hours of daylight in any modern aircraft. They just simply aren't built to go that fast for that long, even with some fancy mid-air refueling. Even the Concorde, the only successful supersonic passenger aircraft, only had a range of around 4,000 miles, putting it well below the 24,000 miles we would need to travel. But this does kind of get close to what we need to do. Remember when I mentioned the international dateline? That's the demarcation for where one calendar day ends and another begins. It runs roughly north to south, but zigzags to accommodate land masses. There have been several times in history when this line passed directly over a landmass, but the governments of those land masses moved their date lines in order to match up. When they did intersect the lines, however, it would be possible to spend 24 hours in one day, then cross the line from west to east, and experience that whole day over again. This is because the time zone on the other side of the island would be a full 24 hours behind. There are even sections of the date line that are a full 25 or 26 hours behind because of how much the line zigzags. This means that you could wake up at 12:01 on any day, say, February 2nd. You would then practice for 24 hours, and at 11 p.m., or 2300 hours, you'd hop on a boat or a plane and cross the date line from east to west, entering just as the previous calendar day of February 1st ended on that side of the line and February 2nd began, giving you another full 24 hours of February 2nd. Now, because this means we technically have 48 hours of daytime to work with, we can schedule our 40 hours of practice accordingly. Nowhere did TUSET ever say that you have to practice for 40 hours in a single sitting, just in a single day. Now, while there are no land masses split across the dateline anymore, there are islands that are close enough that you could travel between them. The islands of Samoa and American Samoa are extremely close together. Additionally, the Diomede Islands between Russia and Alaska are very close together as well, although I'd recommend visiting those during the summer. So I've devised this practice schedule to help you accomplish the 40 hours of practice in a day. You have 40 hours of practice, 6 hours of sleep, 1 hour of travel with a heavy mealtime, and 6 snacking mealtimes split into 10 minutes each. We start with a fairly stable grind. We wake up at 12:01 a.m. on February 2nd. Spend 10 minutes eating breakfast and getting ready. Practice for 6 hours. Eat for 10 minutes, practice for 6 hours. Eat for 10 minutes, practice for 6 hours. Eat for 10 minutes, then practice for 5 hours. It has now been 23 hours and 40 minutes. Things start to get funky from here. Travel for about an hour, being sure to cross the date line at precisely midnight. You could also take this time to eat a substantial meal. Arrive at your next location and practice for 3 hours. Sleep for 6 hours. This is the only sleep you will get. Wake up, eat breakfast and get ready for 10 minutes. Then practice for a grueling 8 hours, eat for 10 minutes, your last mealtime, and then spend the final 6 hours practicing. The single 8-hour grind is grueling but necessary and comes immediately after the only 6 hours of sleep allotted, so I think it's fair. With all this in mind, I think it is technically humanly possible to practice 40 hours in a single calendar day, if you're in the right place at the right time and commit to this schedule or a similar one. If TUSET or any other dedicated musician with unlimited resources tries this, then I think the keys to success are going to be having a companion or friend do it with you, keeping your practices relaxed so you don't wear yourself too thin too fast, and having multiple interesting pieces to learn so that if you get sick of one, you can try another. I would also posit that stretches, short breaks, and physical conditioning are part of practice. So each of these grueling practice sessions are not without their own moments of reprieve and rest. Thinking back on my own musical experience, this schedule actually looks a lot like the schedules that I used to have when I performed in national choirs and led up to big performances. Certainly we had a lot more sleep and more time to eat, but 6-hour practice sessions were not uncommon, and your voice wears out a lot faster than any instrument, so I think this could be done. So while I only have a half an hour to practice, I hope that this video might give someone out there a chance to practice for 40 hours in a single calendar day. And I don't want to call this a challenge or imply that you're not a real musician if you don't do this. But two set, I have figured out a way to practice for 40 hours in a day. It's just up for you to decide if you think that it's worth it.